Okay, great. All right. The first two questions tonight. Number one.
今天晚上同学们提了2个问题。第一个问题是
When judging if an aspect is a waxing aspect or waning aspect, should we take retrograde motion into consideration?
这个问题是当判断剑营和剑龟相位的时候，要考虑运行吗？
No.
不需要。
Retrograde motion has nothing to do with waxing or waning.
这个运行它与剑营与剑龟毫无关系。
It has to do with applying or separating.
它和出相位和入相位是相关的。
Okay? All right. If no one understands that, is there anyone out there that doesn't understand it?
有同学们不了解，就是我刚才说的这句话的吗？
Does everyone understand my answer?
同学们都理解我给大家的答案吗？同学们还是能够听得清楚刚才我给大家的答案吗？就是说，运行它是和出相位和入相位有关系，但是与剑营剑龟相位没有关系。
Good. The way you're twisted there, you're going to need a chiropractor for this class. All right, so it looks good. All right, terrific. All right, number 2. How to use waxing aspects and waning aspects when we interpret charts. For example, how to use them in interpreting natal charts.
第二个问题，在解读星图时，剑营与剑龟相位具体有什么用？比如如何运用它们解读出生星图。
Remember when we were using or organizing the chart, looking for theme signs. Do you remember that?
大家要记住，当我们在组织再去用一张星图的时候，我们在寻找的是主题星座，还记得吗？
When I was a student and early in my practice, for a long time, I would look for these theme signs.
当我还是占星学生的时候，以及当我在我的职业导师的时候，我总是会去在很长的时间之内寻找主题星座。
I was just always kind of curious to see if there was a sign energy that predominated just by looking at the theme signs. And so knowing whether an aspect was waxing or waning could help me to determine more about the theme.
那么我总是会非常好奇的去看一下，那么主题星座是什么？什么样子的星座，它的能量是具有指导性的？那么这个时候去看到剑营和剑龟相位，能够帮助我去决定主题星座。
However, there are other uses too.
然而还有其他的用途。
And when you're thinking about a chart, this is what we call a more subtle interpretive technique, more subtle.
当你去看到一张星图的时候，这个时候就会用到我们所说的对于一张星图的轻微的分析。
So I'm going to give you some examples of this.
我会给大家举一些例子。
We know that all squares might represent pressure, the experience of pressure.
我们知道所有的四分相，它都会代表的是压力。
We know that a waxing square has a Cancer, or the sign Cancer association, whereas a waning square has a Capricorn association.
我们大家都知道，不能听懂，我要照看笔记。我们大家都知道，这个剑营的四分相呢是和巨蟹座的能量相关的，而一个剑龟的四分相是和摩羯座的能量相关的。
So if you think about that, what's the difference in pressure?
如果你想到这一点的话，那么这两者之间的压力有何区别呢？
Capricorn pressure has to do with status and competition.
摩羯座的压力是和社会地位以及竞争相关的，
whereas Cancer pressure has more to do with immediate security, immediate sense of emotional well-being. Am I emotionally comfortable? Does this situation nurture me, contribute to my security?
然而在巨蟹座的时候，我们会考虑的是一个当下的一个安全感，就是说我情绪层面的一个良好的状态，就是我的情绪是能够抚慰我的吗？那么这个情况当下的情况真的可以滋养我吗？还是不清楚吗？
And so there's a difference in the quality of that experience.
因此，在这个经验的体验质量上面是不一样的。
We know that squares, in many ways, represent the building blocks of character.
我们知道四分相它一直是和个性的这个建立，这种基石的建立是联系在一起的。
Therefore, the building block of a waning square might contribute more to achievement and accomplishment.
所以，那么这种四分相的基石的建立，在渐规的四分相的情况之下，就是和这种达成一种成就感相关的。
We may be able to deal with the pressures of planning something, which is very Capricorn.
我们也许会应对一些计划方面的压力，那么这是非常典型的摩羯。
Whereas Cancer is more about creating immediate security or security in one's environment.
而巨蟹座呢，它是在创造一种即时当下的安全感，或者是这个环境的安全感。
The objective is usually less long-term.
这个巨蟹座的目标呢，通常不是那样长期的。
And more about creating a feeling of security, a feeling of well-being.
更多的是关于创造一种安全的感受。
I was not comfortable in the room until I got up and closed that window.
我如果不站起来把这个窗户关上的话，我对这个房间呢是感觉不舒服的。
But I had to struggle with the window.
但是我对这个我在窗户那边呢，我是有些挣扎的。
Because the window handle was broken.
因为那个窗户的把手坏了。
So I had to get some tools to fix this window handle so I could close it.
所以呢，我必须拿到一些工具，去把那个窗户的把手才修好，然后这样才能够把窗户关上。
Here the pressure is on solving a more immediate problem that is contributing to feeling uncomfortable and insecure.
那么在这个时候呢，这种压力就是关于去为了应付去解决这一种即时的当下的安全感，去解决这种当下的这个舒服感、安全感的问题。
Me and my family cannot sleep comfortably in this cold room.
我和我的家人在这个寒冷的房子里面无法睡觉。
You see, so these squares are different.
所以大家看到这些像是不一样的。
Now, I know some of you will come up with examples that seem to confuse or contradict the meaning.
我知道大家可能会举出一些例子，然后和这个意义是有冲突的，或者是在上面有迷惑的。
Some of you might say, well, wait a minute, what's more important? Whether the sign and house position of Mars or whether it's a waxing or waning square.
那么这个时候，有的同学就问了，那么是这个火星的星座和宫位比较重要呢，还是说是一个电影和剑规的四分相重要呢？
Clearly, the sign position and the house position is more important, more obvious.
很明显，这个星座与宫位的话是更加的重要，也更加的明显。
Which is why, as you're peeling back layers, I really want you to think about that. Remember, some of you may remember a few years back, the famous movie cartoon animation Shrek. Remember Shrek?
Yeah.
Okay, mention Shrek.
大家还记得在几年前有一部很有名的动画电影叫《怪物史莱克》。
Well, when Shrek was talking to the donkey,
当时呢，史莱克在和里面的驴子说话。
Shrek starts talking about having layers.
然后 Shrek 他就讲到有很多层次。
And the donkey says, layers, like a cake, like a cake.
然后当时那个驴子他就说，哇，这个层次啊，就像是蛋糕，就像是蛋糕一样。
And Shrek says, no, like an onion.
然后 Shrek 就说，不，像是洋葱，像是洋葱。
Okay. When you're looking at a chart and you are trying to understand it, trying to interpret it.
当你看这一张星图，你试图去了解它，试图去解读它。
You are peeling back layers.
在这个时候，你就是在不停的在一层一层的剥。
Okay. And some of the more subtle layers of behavior and personality would be whether an aspect is waxing or waning.
那么这个时候呢，更加轻微的层面，更加轻微的关于个人的行为或者是人格，这个时候就是我们刚才所说到的见离与见亏相位的表达。
Mars in the sign Capricorn will always be competitive or strive to win.
火星在摩羯座永远是具有竞争力的，永远是想要去有赢的这样子的动力的。
Even though there may be fears of failure associated with this, because it's Capricorn.
也许在这个当中呢，有这个害怕失败的这个意义，因为有摩羯座参与其中。
Right. Okay. Looks like I'm getting some other questions around this.
Not stable.
Not stable?
Yeah.
Gee, she seems very stable to me. Yes. I don't know either. We've tried everything.
我们这个什么都试遍了，还是忽大忽小吗？声音。
Right. Okay. We'll just. I think. What was this last statement?
True. Yeah. They say sometimes good, sometimes not good.
Is that what they're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
all about your voice. Okay. Well, we'll just keep trying. That's all we can do. All right, so we answered to see if there's some other questions here. Okay, those are the only two questions there. Now let's go to the questions. Felicia had some questions that she had posted in the chat earlier. So let's take a look at that if we can. I'm afraid we'll lose transiting planet. Let's see what it says here. Tell everyone we are looking for some questions that Felicia posted earlier.
之前那个 Felicia 发了一些这个问题过来。
Okay. Question was transiting planet on a planet. Will it affect the house the planet rules? For example, transit Neptune on the moon in the 11th house. Moon rules the 4th. Will transit Neptune affect 4th house? Ask that question.
这个问题是这样的，就是说行进的行星呢，然后就是在另外一个行星之上，那么这个时候这颗行星是否会影响它所主导的宫位？举个例子，比如说行进的海王星是正好呢是合了11宫的月亮，而月亮主导的是第4宫，那么这个时候行进的海王星是否也影响了第4宫？
In the materials that we're going through tonight, this question is already posed.
在今天晚上所发的讲义里面，那么这一个问题已经被提了出来。
Though it does not refer to this specific case.
虽然那个讲义上的内容并不是专门指这个问题的。
So I will go ahead and address this very specific case.
那么我呢会接下来跟大家去讲一讲这个 Felicia 所发的这个具体的这个问题。
Okay. Now let's make some assumptions here.
让我们在这里做一些假设。
Let's assume that what Felicia means is that the moon is in Pisces in the 11th house. Let's just say that. I guess that's what she means. I'm not sure.
让我们来假设一下，那么在这个例子当中的月亮是在11宫的双鱼座。
I'm thinking about that. It's probably what she means. Since Neptune is in Pisces, you must mean that this by on the moon, that it's conjunct the moon. I think that's what she means.
因为 Lisa 这里提到的是行进的海王星合了月亮，因为现在海王星在双鱼座，所以我想月亮也应该在双鱼座。
Okay. Remember when we were talking about layers just now?
要大家记得，在我们刚才提到所有这些不同的层次的时候，
Here's something I want you to think about.
我想让大家考虑这么一点。
Okay. 1 out of 12 people, on average, will have the moon in Pisces.
那么，每12个人当中就有1个人，他的月亮会在双鱼座。
How many people, mathematically speaking, might have the moon in Pisces in the 11th house?
那么用这样的数学计算，我们可以看到有多少人的月亮在双鱼座，又在11宫呢？
That would be 1 out of 144.
那么这样算下来，应该是每144个人当中有1个人是有这样的配置。
So when we're looking at a natal chart, even though we're questions about transits, you have to understand the natal chart first.
那么当我们去看本命星图的时候，因为虽然这里是关于行进的问题，但是我们也要记住，这个时候还是要去看本命星图。
Houses really help to individuate the person. In other words, to reveal what is unique about the person.
宫位真的是可以将这个每个人区分出来，宫位可以去揭示出个体它独特的、独一无二的东西。
Because of how the house combines with the planet inside. It's about the combination.
也就是说，要是这个宫位区分出行星三者之间的组合，要去看这个才行。
Where most students get confused is in trying to separate these because they do not function separately in the individual.
很多学生都会把宫位、星座以及行星区分开来，单独个别看待，但是在一张星图当中，这三者不是被区分看待的。
If you were born with the moon in Pisces in the 11th house, no one can surgically remove that moon from your 11th house.
如果你的出生星图当中月亮在双鱼座，在11宫，没有人可以把你这颗月亮从11宫剔除出去。
It's just not possible.
这绝无可能。
Okay? So this means they function in the person together.
也就是说，这三者是共同在一个人身上组合起作用的。
Moon in Pisces is going to be more sensitive to group dynamics in the 11th house than the moon in Pisces in any other house.
一个月亮双鱼座在11宫的人，比起一个月亮双鱼座在其他宫位的人，都会对团体动力更加敏感。
So it's very important that you understand how combination creates meaning.
因此，非常重要的是，大家要理解到这种组合会如何创造出意义。
It is this combination that gives more uniqueness. In a room full of 12 people, or let's say in a room full of 24 people, you might have a couple of people with the moon in Pisces.
就是这种组合才创造出了独一无二性。比如说，在一个24个人的房间当中，也许有几个人的月亮都是在双鱼座。
But in a room full of 288 people, you might only have 2 people with moon in Pisces in the 11th house.
但是在一个288个人的房间当中， 也许你只能找到2个人，他们的月亮是双鱼座，并且在11宫。
Those two people share a common sensitivity to group dynamics.
那这2个人呢，他们对于团体动力都有相同程度的敏感性。
This means that when Neptune is transiting the moon in Pisces in the 11th house, that this sensitivity to group dynamics becomes more sensitive.
那么这就意味着，当行进的海王星合了11宫的月亮双鱼座的时候，这一种对于团体的动力的敏感性会变得更加敏感。
Okay? Now, the moon, of course, still has all the associations that the moon does.
当然，月亮还有它自身和月亮所有相关的含义。
You know? We still associate the moon with mom, associate the moon with family, and that's true in everyone's chart.
我们仍然把月亮与母亲和家庭连接起来，这在任何一张星图当中都是这样。
Someone with the moon in Pisces in the 11th house that has had a positive experience with their mother might say, my mother was my best friend.
一个月亮双鱼11宫的人说到他的积极的影响他会说，我的妈妈是我最好的朋友。
Or if they've had a negative experience with their mother, they might say, I would never choose my mother for a friend.
如果他与他的母亲有相当消极的经验，他就会说，我永远不会选我的妈妈作为我的朋友。
And there's many other variations on this.
此外还有许多其他不同的变化。
Now, what about this question about the fact that the moon, in this case, let's say, is ruling the 4th house?
那么在这个例子当中，月亮是主导的4宫的，那么这样该如何解释呢？
Okay? Which is possible. Cancer could be on the 4th house cusp, for example.
这是很可能的，因为有可能巨蟹座落在4宫头。
Okay. In such a case, we know the moon is associated with home and family anyway.
我们知道月亮无论如何是和与家庭生活联系在一起。
Now that meaning is increased.
那么现在这一种意义就增大了。
And you need to begin to think about how this might be expressed.
你应该去想一下，这应该会得到怎样的表达。
All of my friends, my good friends, came to my assistance after the heavy rain flooded my house.
在一场大雨把我们家冲了之后，我所有的好朋友都过来帮我的忙。
Some of our friends even put me and our family in their own home and let us stay there while we were cleaning up after the flood.
甚至在洪水之后，我有一些朋友还邀请我和我的家人去他们家住了一阵子。
Now, I'm using creativity to give you a real-life circumstance that might be associated with such a combination.
我在这里呢，是用了我的创造力去指出一个实际生活当中的状况，来去表达在这里的这种组合。
Think about all of the things that were just in what I said.
想一想我刚才所说的所有这些情况。
Okay? Neptune can be associated with water.
海王星可能与水相关。
Ocean, lakes, rain.
和海洋、湖泊以及和雨水相关。
Floods.
和洪水相关。
Pipes that burst.
和那个爆裂的水管相关。
A leaking roof.
和那个漏水的屋顶相关。
All of those things.
所有的这些东西。
Even mold on the wall from humidity.
即便是因为潮湿，墙面上所出现的这些霉斑，都是与它相关的。
But here I was easily able to tie together the friendship dynamic of the 11th house with family.
但在这里，我却非常容易的可以把11宫所显示的团体的动力和家庭联系在一起。
The thing we don't know by such an example, because we don't have the whole chart, is we don't know how challenged that moon is. in the chart.
因为我们没有看到整张星图，因此我们不知道月亮在其中的位置有多么挑战。
Okay. Okay. All right. Again, if you've got to learn to use these combinations creatively.
大家还是要以创造性的方式去使用这些组合。
If you listen to your clients or your friends when they are talking with you,
如果你去倾听你的客户或者是朋友，他们与你说话的话
okay, you can use the chart to really hear them.
你真的可以使用星图去疗愈他们，去听到他们。
In the negative sense, what might a person with the moon in Pisces in the 11th house say in the negative sense?
如果以消极的意义来讲的话，一个月亮双鱼座10宫的人，他会说什么话呢？
They might say, in the negative sense, sometimes I feel so drained after being with my friends.
他可能会这样说，有的时候我跟我的朋友待了一会儿之后，我感觉到整个人都被吸干了。
Now, you hear this person say this, and you know they have the moon in Pisces in the 11th house.
那你听到这个人在如此表达，你也知道他的月亮是在10宫的双鱼座。
And you think immediately, drained. They feel drained after they're with their friends for too long. Why? This sounds like Pisces.
你就会有这种感觉，他们说自己被吸干了，你吸干了，这个好像是和双鱼座相关，听起来是这个双鱼座的东西。
And what kind of Pisces issue is this?
那么这是一个什么样的双鱼座的课题呢？
Lack of boundaries.
缺乏界限。
Okay? So that I let my friends tell me all their troubles.
所以我就让我的朋友们去告诉我所有他们的麻烦。
Now, I like to help my friends.
我确实很想帮助我的朋友。
I'm empathetic and I like to be there for them.
我这个人是很共情的，我也愿意去在朋友身边。
But if this person doesn't know where to stop, where to draw the line, they become drained.
但是如果这个人他不知道什么时候停下来，什么时候应该划清界限，那么他就会被吸干。
You might imagine that if Neptune was transiting that moon in Pisces, and this person has this problem, that it's going to magnify that issue.
这个时候，如果你想到行星的海王星合了月亮在双鱼座的话，那么这方面的议题就会扩大。
Maybe their mother set the example of being everyone's friend.
也许他们的母亲做出了这样的一个榜样，成为了所有人的朋友。
And they feel like they have to live up to that ideal.
他们感觉到他们必须能够去符合那样的理想状态。
Think mother, ideal, this moon, Pisces, 11th house, friends. See?
所以大家看到了这种母亲理想状态，然后朋友都是在和月亮双鱼座10宫联系在一起的。
This is how to work with combination.
就是要以这样的方式来去处理组合。
You've got to think about this as an artist.
你们必须要把它当成是一个艺术家的工作。
You take a little bit of yellow, pink, a little bit of blue, mix them together, you have green.
你把黄和蓝放到一起，然后就出现了绿色。
Okay? So you get this different color out of the combination.
这样的话，在不同的组合情况下，就出现了不同的颜色。
And that gives it a different feel, a different look, a different meaning.
这样的话，感觉不一样，看起来不一样，意义也不同。
Okay? See, I understand. I know all of you want, and again, I've given you a list of priorities when it comes to organizing the natal chart, haven't I?
在组织一张本命星图的时候，我已经把优先顺序给大家都已经把那个表给你们了。
Now we're learning about forecasting.
现 现在我们在学习预测。
And there are some logical rules to follow when it comes to transits.
在说到行进的时候，确实是有一些逻辑的法则可以去遵守的。
However, in the interpretation, you need to first understand the natal chart before you can begin to explain the trend.
然而在解读的时候，你必须要首先了解本命星图，然后你才能够去解释这个趋势。
Okay. All right. Is there any other question that we should have? There's one about cosmic weather. Phoebe. Okay, great. All right. So now we're going to move on to the course material. Unless, let me see what the new questions are. Anyone have any questions yet?
No. Let me just go up. Let me see. Just a check. Oh.
Okay, go on. I saw that cosmic weather question on there.
No. Okay.
Did they answer that? Okay. Great. All right. We're going to switch back to, there we go. All right. We got some interesting things to look at tonight.
今天晚上的话，我们有很有意思的讲义内容。
You know, last week you got the material about short-term transits and triggers. I want to talk about that.
在上周的讲义当中，我们讲述了短期行进所触发器。
You have your list of priorities from last week's material.
在上周的讲义当中，已经给大家列出了那个优先的顺序表。
Okay. Is that a question? Okay. And last week we talked about all the planets from Pluto through Jupiter.
上一周我们是讲了从冥王星到木星的这些行星。
Okay. So what happens with Mars transits, Venus transits, Mercury transits, Moon, Sun? What happens with these?
那么在说到太阳、月亮、水星、火星和金星的时候，那么这些的行进该怎么办呢？
Okay. As we know, except for when Mars is retrograding, or any of these little planets are retrograding, Mercury, Venus, or Mars, they move pretty fast.
我们知道这个水星、火星还有金星，它们除了在运行的时候，它们的运行速度其实是非常的快的。
And that's why we call them short-term transits.
所以我们才把它们称作是短期行进。
Okay. And you need to watch them. They're very interesting.
你们需要去观察它们，它们非常有意思。
I want to give you an example of one from my little cartoon tomorrow.
我给大家去举一个例子，这里我画的一个这个卡通人物。
Okay. Here's what the young lady says.
这名年轻的女士是这么说的。
She says, I can't wait to hear how you read this. She says, so my seventh house sun in Gemini is being squared by transiting Neptune, and I know dating two guys at the same time can be confusing anyway, but the other day I called D Lee by mistake at the wrong moment. Do you think when Mercury in Sagittarius opposes my sun, I will finally tell them the truth?
这段话是这样的，就是说我的太阳落在西宫和双子座，然后四分了行进的海王星。我知道同时和两个男人约会，肯定还是会让人迷惑的。但是那一天呢，我把那个姓狄的调成了姓李的，然后而且是很不合时宜的这样叫错了。那你觉得我水星在射手座对分我的太阳的时候，我会告诉他们真相吗？
Okay. Now, we have a long-term trend in effect.
事实上，我们是有一个长期的这个趋势的。
Neptune is squaring the natal sun. Neptune's in Pisces, squaring the natal sun in Gemini.
我们知道这个在双鱼座的海王星是四分了在双子座的太阳。
And you know a Neptune transit can last 2 years, 2.5 years.
大家知道，一个海王星的行进可能会持续2年到2年半的时间。
Okay. And remember, 3 degrees of plying, 1 degree separated.
此外的话，要记住是3度的入相位，1度的出相位。
Neptune swings in, swings out, swings in, but it's in your life for 2 years, 2.5 years.
所以海王星是在你的这个生命当中呢是2年、2年半的样子，一会儿进来，一会儿出来。
In the case of this young lady in our cartoon, she was born with the sun in Gemini in the 7th house.
在我们的这一个例子当中，这位女士她的太阳是在西宫的双子座。
She likes a little variety in her men.
她就喜欢男人上面有一些多样性。
This might mean she could certainly date one man who was very interesting, clever, and smart.
这有可能会意味着说，她会和一个特别聪明的、机智的这样的男人约会。
However, Neptune often tends to bring in what we also I don't know where that's from. What we would call complications. Sounds like Neptune. I think Neptune just
把 monster 写完，把这个写完，好吗？
我觉得海王星刚刚的进入到了我们的
最后一个。
Can we do something about that microphone?
是刚才谁的麦克没有关？海王星进入到了我们的平台。
I don't want whatever this family is talking about to become more interesting than what I'm talking about.
我不希望大家对于刚才这家说的话比对我说的话还要感兴趣。
All right. So we're talking about Neptune. What's happened here is this young woman has complicated her life.
那么海王星呢，它就会和复杂的情况相关了。那在这个例子当中呢，这位女士的生活复杂化了。
Maybe she's trying to avoid intimacy for some reason.
也许因为某种原因，她试图想逃避亲密。
By dating 2 guys.
通过去和2个男人约会来去避免这一点。
Or maybe she's got some insecurities. She has one, and he leaves. Well, now she has another.
也许她有一些不安，如果她和一个人约会，这个人离开她了，那她还有另外一个。
Both her insecurity about maybe having someone not be there for her, and it might also be connected to some intimacy issues as well.
但是她这种对于有人可能会不在她身边的安全感，也会和她的这个亲密的一起连接起来。
We know that Neptune always, whatever it comes in contact with, will feel to the person, feel more sensitive.
我们知道，无论海王星以什么样子的形式与这个人关联起来，总会让这个人感觉到更加的敏感。
How does the person feel when they feel more sensitive?
当一个人感觉更敏感的时候，这是一种什么感觉呢？
They feel vulnerable.
他们感觉到脆弱。
No one likes to feel vulnerable.
没人就想感觉到脆弱呀。
Okay? And so to cope with this vulnerability, we'll try to find ways to avoid it. We don't want to feel vulnerable, so we try to avoid it.
因为我们不想感受到脆弱，于是我们去找到各种方式来去避免脆弱的。
We know that a person with the sun in the 7th house, that partnership is very important to them.
对于一个太阳在西宫的人来说，我们知道这种伴侣关系对他来说十分重要。
Generally speaking, the sun in the 7th house means that marriage and partnership, companionship is very high in their priorities.
通常来说，一个太阳在西宫的人，他的婚姻关系、伙伴关系、伴侣关系，对他合作关系对他来说都非常重要。
In this case, Gemini is wanting a partner that they can communicate with, someone who is clever, intelligent, and gregarious. Gregarious means talkative, outgoing, chatty.
那么对于一个太阳在西宫双子座的人来说，那么他的伴侣要能够与他交流，他的伴侣要能够非常的聪明，非常会讲话。
Now, so this trend has been going on for a while, let's say.
那么也就是说，这个趋势已经进行了一段
I'd take a real life situation here, people.
同学们，我在这里可是选了一个真实的生活案例啊，
In this silly cartoon,
虽然是用这样的一个傻傻的卡通做出来的。
we know that Neptune is making a station very shortly at 4 degrees of Pisces.
我们知道海王星在4度双鱼座做了短暂的停滞。
You would know this if you were memorizing this book.
如果你们背下来这本书的话，你们就会记住了。
Okay? Therefore, we can assume that her sun is 4 degrees Gemini or close to it.
因此，我们就可以推算它的太阳是在4度的双子座附近。
And you can look in your ephemeris very quickly
然
and
后，
say, when will Mercury be at 4 degrees of Sagittarius? When will Mercury be at 4 degrees of Sagittarius?
于是你就看一下你的星表，去看一下水星什么时候会处在4度射手座的位置。
Monday, December 1st.
是12月1号星期一的时候。
Look, right away you can see it.
看一眼你的星历表，你就知道了。
So our question is, will she finally tell the truth to her boyfriends this weekend?
所以我们在这里的问题就变成了，这周末的时候，她会最终跟她的男朋友们说出真相吗？
Because a faster moving planet, in this case Mercury, is triggering this trend. It's not only just Mercury opposing the Sun like it does at least once a year, every year. It's doing it during the time that Neptune is there.
因为在这个地方，水星这个运行速度较快的行星，它触发了海王星的这一个长期的趋势。也就是说，水星不仅仅是对攻了太阳，那么这种状况是1年出现一次。
When long-term trends are triggered by a faster moving planet, you will get some kind of either breakthrough in awareness and or an event of some kind or circumstance of some kind that fits what's going on.
当一个快速行进的行星触发了一个长期趋势的时候，那么你就会这个时候会有一种忽然的觉察，或者是出现一个状况，或者是出现一个事件来去符合当下的那一个情景。
So perhaps, we don't know, but perhaps there's been this pattern of avoidance going on, maybe for a year, maybe 2 years.
我们不知道，也许会有这种逃避的模式已经出现了1年或者是2年了。
Mercury comes along in Sagittarius, sign, a fire sign that we know is associated with a need to tell the truth in some way.
但是水星到了射手座这个火象星座，我们就知道有这种需要去讲出真相的需求。
And the truth may not just be that these two guys don't know about each other.
这个真相并不仅仅是这2个男人互相不知道彼此。
The deeper truth is, what is this Gemini woman running away from?
真相是这一个双子座的女人在从什么地方逃开呢？
What is she avoiding?
她在逃避什么呢？
Why has she complicated her life in this way?
为什么她要以这种方式来去复杂化自己的人生呢？
Now, this is a simple example,
这只是一个简单的例子，
but it is a very normal, true-to-life example.
但它却是一个非常平常的、非常真实的生活的例子。
And it shows you very simply how these principles work.
这会非常简单的向大家展示这些原则的适用性。
Okay? When a fast-moving planet triggers something in the chart that is part of a big trend, it's important.
当一个运行速度较快的行星触发了星图当中的一个长期趋势的时候，这会非常重要。
When a short-term, fast-moving transit triggers or aspects something in the natal chart, and there is no big trend going on with that planet, it is not as important.
如果是一 个运行速度较快的短期的行进和本命星图形成相位的话，但是这个时候没有长期行进的长期趋势的话，那重要性则没有那么明显。
If Neptune was not squaring this Gemini sun, the Mercury opposition to her sun might express itself in some way, but it would not be that important.
如果这个海王星没有与太阳双子座的太阳形成这个相位的话，那么如果它的水星对分了它的太阳，这种情况下就不会有那么的重要。
There might be some kind of communication that stood out a little bit.
也许会有一些其他形式的这种沟通会显示出来。
But it would not be as significant as the kind of circumstances we're describing here.
但是它的重要性就不会像是我们在这里描述的那样的明显。
Now, I want to see what people are saying. What was this about right here? I saw a long. Any questions there? Look at this. What's this? We're looking at your questions, people.
我们现在在看张家军的问题。张家军的问题是this needs of diversity of partnership. It is not only connected with the sun in the seventh house, right?
No, it's because it's in Gemini.
这种对伴侣多样性需求可能不仅仅和七宫太阳有关吧？对，是和双子座相关的。
Sun in the seventh house just means partnership support. The sun wants to shine in whatever house it's in.
太阳在七宫只是意味着他的这个伴侣关系对他非常非常重要，因为无论太阳在哪里，它都代表着他需要去发光的地方。
Okay. That's another question.
Yeah, another question. When the Mercury is in Sagittarius in retrograde in the first house opposing his sun, does that mean that even though she doesn't want to tell the truth, but she will be forced to tell the truth, especially when especially when in the seventh house there is not only sun but other planets.
I don't really know if you can ever force a Gemini to tell the truth.
还有这个下面一段的问题是，当这个运行的射手座水星行进过一宫对分太阳的时候，会不会就算他不想也会被迫说出真相呢？老师说，我不确定你是有能力逼迫一个双子座说出真相。
Remember, the planets don't force anybody to do anything.
要记住，行星不会去强迫任何人做任何事。
It's very simple. It's just like if it's freezing cold outside, okay? You can still take all your clothes off and go running outside if you want to.
很简单啊，如果外面都快冻死了，但是如果你选择把所有衣服脱了在大街上裸奔，也没有人会管你的。
However, before you're arrested, you will probably find yourself very cold. Before you're arrested, you will find yourself very cold.
但是问题是，当你被抓之前，你会发现其实你自己在那边裸奔的挺冷啊。
Okay. Now, the cosmic weather can sometimes feel as insistent as the pressure of weather that we're used to.
这种宇宙天气可能有的时候会感觉到像我们的这种我们所经历的这种天气一样的，它有这种坚持性。
But here's the point. Does the fact that it's winter hold you back from having a good vibe?
但是问题是这样的，有冬天存在的这一事实，它阻止了你去享受人生吗？
No.
并没有。
I mean, if it does, you haven't learned how to deal with winter yet.
那如果它阻止你的话，那你得学习怎么样去应对过冬天了。
The same might be true of your relationship with Saturn.
那么你和土星的关系也同样如此。
See, if you haven't learned how to handle responsibilities, if you haven't learned how to plan your life responsibly, you're going to have trouble with Saturn.
如果你还没有学习负责任，没有学习计划人生的话，那么你就会出现土星的问题。
And every time Saturn comes along, you're going to go, I hate Saturn, I hate it, I hate Saturn.
然后每一次土星过来的时候，你就会说我恨土星，我恨透它了。
It's not Saturn, it's you.
不是土星问题，是你的问题。
It's like if you're standing outside in the cold without any clothes on, arguing with someone else about the fact that you're colder than they are, something's wrong with you.
所以如果你在外面没有穿衣服，然后感觉到很冷，然后跟一个人争论，你比他们感觉还要更冷，那这个时候只能说明你自己有问题，对吗？
The problem's not with the season.
问题并不是季节的问题，
The problem's with how you deal with it.
而是你如何去应对季节的问题。
You've got to remember this.
你们必须要记住这一点。
Okay? Otherwise, all you're doing is victimizing yourself and victimizing your client.
要不然的话，你所做的只能是让你自己和让你的客户成为受害者。
We are not victims of the planet
我们不是行星的受害者，
any more than we are victims of the seasons
我们也不是季节的受害者，
or the weather, for that matter.
我们也不是天气的受害者。
Or some of you might say, well, what about being struck by lightning?
有些同学就问了，那要是被闪电打中怎么办呢？
Maybe you shouldn't be standing under a tree during a thunderstorm.
那也许在雷电的时候，你不应该站在树下面呢。
Okay? It's about awareness, isn't it?
所以这都是关于觉察的。
Astrology is meant to help us be more aware so we can make better decisions.
占星学是帮助我们有更深的觉察，以便让我们做出更好的决定。
And astrology gives us all of this information,
占星学给了我们所有的这些信息，
okay, to help us make better decisions in our lives.
让我们能够在人生当中做出更好的决定。
We know that if this woman confesses the truth to her boyfriend, that it's going to be painful for a little while.
我们知道，如果这一个女士向她的男朋友们坦诚真相的话，会在一阵子之内让她痛苦。
Chances are she'll lose both boyfriends.
可能性很高的就是两个男朋友都失去了。
Both of them probably say, well, why did you lie to me?
两个人可能都会跟她讲，为什么你要对我们撒谎呢？
Maybe when they ask her this question, she will discover the truth.
也许当他们问她这个问题的时候，她自己会发现真相。
Maybe this will help her the rest of her life.
也许这会帮到她的余生。
Okay? She'll have learned something.
她必须要学会一些东西。
This is what it's all about, people.
同学们，就是关于这些的。
Okay? All right. If you're not busy being born, you're busy dying.
如果你不是忙着活着，就是忙着死。
And if you're not busy learning, you're not living.
你如果没有忙碌的学习，你就没有在活。
Okay, all right. So let's go up here a little bit. Let's take a look at the questions, and this kind of goes to some of the points that Felicia was trying to make earlier.
我们来先过一下讲义中的问题，这有一点点呼应了 Lisa 刚才所问的问题。
These questions were left over from last week, and they are very, very good questions.
这些问题是上周的遗留问题，非常好。
Number one, how do we interpret a transiting planet in different aspect combinations?
第一个问题，我们如何解释行星的不同相位组合呢？
Okay. Again, notice the key word here, I think, is combination.
我觉得这里的关键词是组合。
We made the point earlier about combinations in the natal chart,
我们之前已经提到了在本命星图当中的组合。
And I think what he's referring to here is, what if it's the same planet, but the aspect is different? For example, what's the difference between a Neptune square versus a Neptune opposition? Or a Pluto square versus an opposition and a conjunction?
我觉得这里可能谈论的是同样的行星，但是不同的相位，比如说，海王星四分或海王星对分，以及冥王星四分或冥王星对分或合相，它们的区别是什么呢？
And again, so he's asking about aspect combinations.
所以这里还是问的是相位的组合。
Now remember, This is where your keywords come in very handy.
这个时候关键词就会很有用的。
Okay? Pluto is always Pluto, and there's the constructive side of Pluto and the destructive side of Pluto.
冥王星永远都是冥王星，它是有建设性的一面，也有毁灭性的一面。
When I say that, I mean in each of us, there is a constructive response and a destructive response.
当我这样说的时候，我的意思是说，在我们每一个人的内部都有一个建设性，也有一个这种毁灭性的一个回应。
Okay? And the question might be, well, let's take Pluto for example. How does that differ? How does that differ if you've got, say, Pluto squaring your moon versus Pluto opposing your moon?
那么冥王星四分你的月亮和冥王星对分你的月亮有什么差别呢？
You want to look at it to try and understand, the difference between the square experience and the opposition.
这时候你就要去看这个四分相和对分相两者之间的差异。
An opposition has a Libra quality to it.
对分相有天秤座的含义。
So the Pluto opposition to a moon, say by transit, is going to manifest a little bit more in terms of relationship dynamics.
因此，月亮对分冥王星，在行进的情况下，那么它就会有一个这个关系方面的动力。
Right? Let's say, that you, since Pluto's in Capricorn, let's say you have the moon in Cancer, for your natal moon.
那么冥王星是在摩羯座，假设我们的月亮是在巨蟹座。
So, again, it's going to play out in terms of the relationships in your life, particularly it could be a husband-wife situation, boyfriend-girlfriend, whatever.
那么这个呢，就很有可能在你生活当中，你关系动力的形式展示出来，无论是妻子丈夫还是男女朋友。
I'll give you an example
我给大家举个例子。
From a case within the last couple of years.
是我前几年过去这几年的这个其中的一个案例显示出来的。
I knew a woman with the moon in Cancer and Pluto opposing it, and she was going through a divorce.
我认识一名女士，月亮在巨蟹座对分了冥王星，那么她正在经历一场离婚。
And she was involved with a custody battle with her future ex-husband over the custody, meaning control, of the two children.
她与她的这个未来的前夫呢，就对于两个孩子的抚养权展开了一场争斗。
Now she's the moon in Cancer, so children, family is very important to her.
她是一个月亮巨蟹座，那么家庭与孩子对她十分重要。
But she's being challenged to negotiate with her future ex-husband over control, custody of these children.
但是她却受到了这样的挑战，她要与她未来的前夫针对于两个孩子抚养权的这样的一个控制权的这样的一个争斗，展开一场这种谈判。
Such a circumstance would be a little bit more typical of the opposition in this case.
那么这样的状况呢，就很典型的可以说是一个对分相的情况。
Even though there's thousands of other examples.
即便还可以举出其他的数千个的不同的例子。
Let's talk about square.
让我们再谈论一下对分相。
These days, Pluto in Capricorn is either going to square the moon in Aries or the moon in Libra.
那么现在的话，这个冥王星在摩羯座的话，它要不然就是对分白羊座的月亮，要不然就是对分天秤座的月亮。
So we, again, I'm just using the moon, just sticking with the moon.
那我还继续去用月亮的例子。
So you've got to think about the differences in the signs here.
那么在这个地方，你也必须要考虑到星座的差异。
This helps you understand a little bit the difference between the difference of how to interpret the transit.
这样的话，你可以去了解了解一下如何去解读行进的这个不同的差异。
Okay. We know that Pluto in Capricorn is moving as it squares the moon in Aries, is in, of course, a waning square to that moon.
我们知道，在摩羯座的冥王星，它和在白羊座的月亮形成四分相的话，是形成一个渐亏的四分相。
Okay, and so if you think about that, it suggests that there's some kind of challenge going on here, some pressure around the issue of what Moon in Aries needs now, because we know that Moon in Aries is more about the here and now. I need this now, versus something that has to do with longer term objectives, which is both Capricorn and the waning square, the double Capricorn statement.
那么我们知道，在这个地方就会有一些关于月亮白羊座它的这种当下的这种需求的压力与挑战。同时呢，我们还要考虑到一些比较长期的目标。这种呢，既是摩羯座的体现，也是一个渐亏的四分相的表达。
So suppose a client comes to you, what's going on? They've got Moon in Aries, and they come to you and they say, I need to buy this house now.
那么假设你的客户来了，他的月亮是在这样的白羊座，他说我现在就需要买这个房子。
And in typical Aries fashion, they don't, they're not patient. They want to get it as soon as possible.
如果是一个典型的白羊座的样子的话，他们就是没有什么耐心，就想立刻买下。
If they disregard the longer term consequences of their own, as a result of their own impatience, they could take out a loan on this house that has what we call, I don't know if you have this in China, it's called a balloon payment. I'll explain that. Balloon payment, yeah. It's where you get a really good deal on the loan on the property in the beginning. You get a really good interest rate, a really good deal at first, which Aries would like. I got a really good deal.
那如果这个白羊座不太去考虑他的这种不耐心可能会对他产生的这种长期后果的话，那么他就有可能呢会去贷一个款，我们在美国呢把它称作是这种气球的这种贷款，也就是说刚开始的时候那个利息啊什么各方面都特别的划算。
So in their hurry to solve this problem, if they ignore the longer term consequences, it could have a terrible impact upon them in terms of their security. They may find that after a year, that interest rate that they got a good deal on has now gone up so much that they can barely afford it.
如果他们非常急着要买，而且去忽略了这种长期可能带来的后果的话，他们就有可能会在他们的安全感上面造成一种非常极大的一种损害。他们也许会发现在1年之后，他的这个利息变得如此之高，他们都无法去承受了。
So for Aries, the lesson is how to consider planning something better. How to plan. This is what Capricorn teaches. This is what Saturn teaches. This is what the waning square teaches. It teaches us about how to organize and plan our agenda for longer term.
这个白羊呢，他就需要去学习计划。那么这个计划与组织呢，长期的计划与组织都是摩羯座、土星还有渐亏的四分相在教导我们的东西。
This is not an easy thing for Aries to learn.
对于一个白羊来说，这并不是容易学会的任务。
But they can learn it, they can modify their behavior and improve their ability to what? Survive in the world.
但是他们是可以学习，可以去修正他们的行为，然后呢，能够获得一个什么样的结果呢？就是改善他们在这个世界上的生存能力。
Instead of buying a house that they might lose due to their own impatience, they might buy a house they can hold on to.
由于他们的缺乏耐心，他们有可能呢，最后会去失去他们这个本来要抓住的这个房子。
Remember, Aries does not like to stand in line, even for a deal.
要记住，即便是做一场交易，白羊座也不愿意去排队等的。
Capricorn will stand in line Day. Oh, damn day for a deal.
那一个摩羯座呢，他可能是一整天排着队去做成这一笔交易都可以。
Okay. All right. All right. Just gotta think about this. Think about what you're dealing with and what's happening with this trend. I'm trying to show you how this works. What about Moon and Libra in this case?
那大家要以这种方式去思考这种趋势。那如果在这种情况下换成月亮天秤座会怎样呢？
Here, if we've got a Moon in Libra, obviously we have Pluto in Capricorn is in a waxing square relationship. So this is a Cancer square, isn't it?
那么在这种情况下，在摩羯座的冥王星就和在天秤座的月亮形成一个渐明的四分相，也就是说是一个巨蟹式的四分相。
I will give you an example from my own practice.
我从我的职业当中给大家举一个例子。
A man with the moon in Libra.
一个月亮天秤座男人的例子。
He's dating a woman.
他在约会一个女子。
But she has children from a previous marriage.
那这个女士呢，她前一次婚姻留下了一个孩子。
Okay, and so his anxiety is the pressure of having stepchildren.
所以这个男子他的焦虑就是他可能会有一些继子。
Here it's about what will my life be like, my home life be like? What's that going to be like? Because he might say, when we're together and the children are with us, sometimes I feel have a lot of anxiety. I feel very insecure. I don't feel like I'm getting the attention that I need from this woman, even though I love her very much, but I'm having to share her with children, with family. It's very uncomfortable.
那么这一男子呢，他可能就会在这个家庭生活上有一些焦虑，有一些不安。那么他会说，我虽然很爱这个女士，但是呢，我感觉到我必须要和他的孩子们共享他，而且我需要的这种关注，他也有可能不会完全给我。他在这一方面有焦虑与不安。
Here we're talking about a moon in Libra, which by itself means, I need the security of partnership. Very simple.
那么这个地方的月亮在天秤座，就是说，我需要这个伴侣，那么这种伴侣所带来的安全感。
But the Pluto transit is reflecting, is a better word for it, reflecting the pressure in that man's life about whether or not he needs this relationship and what goes with it, which in this case, all the stepchildren, meaning his girlfriend's children.
那么在这种情况下，这种行进的冥王星呢，就会反映出这名男子的压力，就是说，那么有了这些句子之后，那我和我的女朋友这个关系会怎么样？虽然我很需要这个关系。
If we got married, I may have to sell where I live because it's not big enough. Where she lives is not the right place, and I haven't figured out how I'm going to solve this problem.
比如说，如果我们俩结婚的话，那我可能要去卖掉我现在的房子。可是呢，他现在住的那个地方呢，又不是我很喜欢的，所以到底要怎么解决这个问题呢？
It's a lunar problem. It's about house, but it's made more cancer by the fact that this is a waxing square. This is the point I'm making.
那么这是房子的问题，是和月亮相关的。此外的话，也有巨蟹式的巨蟹式的含义，因为它是一个渐明的四分相。
In both of these cases, it's intense because it's Pluto.
在两种情况下都是非常的强烈的，因为是冥王星。
Meaning both of these people, one is the moon in Aries, one is the moon in Libra, both of them are feeling the intensity of Pluto. The moon in Cancer person also is feeling the intensity of Pluto.
在这个两种情况下，无论是月亮在白羊还是月亮在天秤，都感受到了冥王星的激烈程度。
Okay, but the way it's manifesting in the challenges of their life is more characteristic of the sign of their moon and the nature of the aspect of the transit.
但是这种显现的这种不同的表现呢，就是由月亮的星座以及由于这个相位的这种不同所引起的。
I think sometimes the problem that students will have, and maybe some of you have encountered this, is that you'll think of these aspects abstractly.
有一些同学遇到的问题是，你们会抽象的去考虑这些相位。
It's only natural to do that.
这样做很自然。
But in nature, in real life, these aspects don't occur abstractly.
但事实上，在现实生活当中，这些相位不是以抽象的形式表达出来的。
These transits are always moving through signs. They're always moving through the zodiac.
那么这些行径呢，他们总是在经行这个黄道，在经行这些星座。
You don't have an opposition or a square without there being signs involved.
如果没有星座参与其中的话，是不可能会有这种四分或对分相的。
Okay, now looks like we got a whole slew of other questions here. Anything there? That's the one from before, right? Anything jump out at you? More down? Oops. Not confused. Everyone seemed like they were getting it. Let's see.
They're saying that the Gemini is the person who would spoil the relationship.
Maybe, maybe not. I think that's unfair to Gemini.
双子花心，老师说，也许花心，也许不花，这样说对双子好不公平。
Gemini is as a sign likes diversity, likes variety.
双子是一个喜欢多样性的一个星座。
You know, and Gemini might like to talk to lots of different people.
也许双子喜欢和很多不同的人说话。
All the air signs are social and like to talk to people.
所有的风象星座都是社交性的，喜欢与人沟通的。
Gemini is just the most curious.
双子只不过是最好奇的那个。
And most visibly social in that sense.
而且是最可见的，就是爱社交的。
So a lot of times people just assume because this Gemini is having coffee with this person and they see him later having lunch with this person and then dinner with this person, they must be sleeping with all of them.
所以有的时候人就会说，他这个双子看见他一会儿跟这个喝咖啡，结果午饭又跟另外一个吃的，晚饭又跟另外一个人吃的，所以他们就觉得肯定是跟这些人都睡过了。
It's not true.
并不是这样。
Yes, question.
就是刚才老师说的就是在太阳在某一个就是宫位的时候，就是那个宫位就会比较重要，但是如果是在八宫会是怎么样的？因为八宫比较难。
同学的问题是，刚才老师讲到太阳在哪一个宫位，就是太阳很重要。那么太阳在八宫会怎么样呢？因为八宫比较难以形容。
What about the eighth house? Eighth house, you asked me that one. That's what I thought you said. Okay. I'm starting to hear a little better. All right. An eighth house sun is even more intense than a seventh house sun about trust issues. Both of them, we know the seventh and eighth house are relations of houses.
我们知道七宫和八宫都是关系的宫位，那么一个八宫的太阳，它会比一个七宫的太阳会更加遭遇这个信任方面的议题。
But an eighth house sun is much more concerned about the trust issue all the way through. More like Scorpio.
八宫的太阳呢，它就更像是那个天蝎座，有很强的信任议题。
I mean, we all have an eighth house. Everybody's got an eighth house.
每个人都有八宫。
Remember, just because you don't have any planets in the eighth house, it doesn't mean, oh look, I have no planets in the eighth house. I'm not going to die.
所以并不是说你的八宫没有行星，你就可以说哇，我八宫没有行星，我就不会死。
We all have an eighth house. If you have the sun in the eighth house, it means everything that we know about the eighth house is very, very important to this individual.
所以每个人都有八宫，那如果太阳在八宫的话，那就是我们对于八宫所知道的一切信息呢，对这个个体都非常非常非常重要。
This person may write a will at the age of 21. Write a will, where everything's going to go when I die. What I want done with my ashes.
那么这个人可能会在21岁就会写下他自己的遗嘱。
They might buy life insurance policy.
他们会可能在很小的时候就会自己买这种生命的保险。
Look over and say to their friends, I think I'm going to make you the recipient of my life insurance when I die.
有可能会对他的朋友说，那这个我想让你成为这个我的保单的这种受益人。我死的时候，你就是那个受益人。
Now, it's more of a concern about what is it going to cost me if I get involved with someone and they leave me.
这个他会更多的去考量，如果我和一个人真的这样连接在一起，然后这个人又会离开我，那我会损失什么呢？
Because the sense of investment, I think, is greater with the sun in the 8th house than it is in the 7th. There's a greater sense of investment.
这个太阳在八宫行取，太阳在七宫来，更有很强的这种投资的意味。
More than likely, this person has some kind of experiences with issues of rejection and has, some scars in this area.
那么这个人呢，可能比常人会更多的有这种遭遇拒绝、排斥，或者是有这方面的伤口的经验。
Okay, so we know the 8th house is a very important relationship house. It's just far more intense than the 7th.
我们知道，那么八宫呢，它是一个非常重要的关系的宫位，比七宫它的这种激烈程度要强多了。
Think about it. There's a difference between the feeling of rejection versus abandonment.
想想看，在这种感受到拒绝与被抛弃之间是有很强的差别的。
Think they have a much different feeling. Rejection could be a 7th house experience.
所以非常不一样。那么这种被拒绝有可能是七宫的体验。
Rejection hurts.
这种拒绝会伤人。
But the 7th house person is not going to feel it like the 8th house person does.
但是这个七宫的人可能不如这种八宫的人感受如此明显。
Okay, all right. Anything else there about that? Anything else?
Oh, this is an article from the article called
Great. Terrific. Okay. All right, now, I want to show you something tonight. I've got some cases here that I want to get into.
那今天晚上还想让大家去看这个案例。
The reason that I have these ephemeris pages in here of 2013, because we're going to look at a case for someone in 2013.
之所以我会把2013年的这个星历表一页贴在讲义里面呢，是因为我们要去看一个人在2013年的行径。
And guess what?
你们猜是谁？
As you know from looking at this material,
大家知道了，看了这个讲义。
we're not going to be looking at Gandhi's chart tonight.
今天晚上我们不会去看甘地的星图，
And we're going to be looking at Angelina Jolie's chart.
我们要去看这个安吉丽娜·朱莉的星图。
No, she was not a girlfriend of Gandhi
她不是甘地的女朋友。
in her last life.
在她的上一辈子是。
Okay, all right. Yeah. Something happened in 2013 that was very, very dramatic and important in Angelina's life.
2013年，在朱莉的生活当中发生了一些非常重要的、有戏剧化的这样一些事件。
And I studied this event in preparation for a previous COAC that I taught.
那在上年的这个COAC 的这个课程当中呢，我就是对这个案例进行一些调研。
Because we know we have an accurate birth time for Angelina.
我们知道我们有安吉丽娜朱莉的准确的生时。
remember, whenever you are about to enter into the land of forecasting, you have to first become very familiar with the natal chart.
但是你们要记住，每当你们要做预测之前，一定要是对本命星图非常的熟悉。
So let's take a look at Angelina's chart.
好，现在让我们去看一眼安吉丽娜的星图。
See if I can get it to move into the center. I guess that's close enough. Let me grab this little laser pointer here and see if I can use it without disturbing things too much. There we go. All right. Now, you're going to get used to looking at this chart because Angelina's got a great chart for study. I have found in the last few years that her chart is just a perfect chart to study.
那么大家要很熟悉这张星图，因为呢，在过去几年当中，我发现这个朱莉她的星图呢是一张研究用的非常完美的星图。
The details of her life are well known or can be easily found out online.
她的生活的细节是广为人知的，或者是很容易在互联网上查到。
Which means studying her natal chart and comparing it to the public record is an easy thing to do.
也就是说，你去研究她的星图，然后和这种公共的档案对比一下，是很容易做到的。
In that sense, her life is pretty much an open book.
因为她的生活就很像是一本打开的书。
Not the most comfortable thing for a Cancer rising.
是一个上升巨蟹来说，没有那个舒服这件事情。
Now, I met Angelina by accident, oddly enough, in New York City. I think it was in 2009 or 2008.
大概是在2008年19年的时候呢，我在纽约偶遇了安吉丽娜·朱莉。
It might have been in 2008, like November, October.
大概是08年10月、11月的样子。
It's at the New York Film Festival.
是在纽约的这个电影展上面遇到她的，电影节上面遇到她的。
It was the debut of a film called The Changeling, and she played the starring role in The Changeling.
那有一部电影呢叫做《Changeling》，那么这个安吉丽娜在那部电影里面是担当的主演。
Anyway, I'd always, like all of you, I'd always seen her on the big screen and thought of her as very, strong and kind of wild, intense woman.
那么当时呢是那部电影的首映礼，像大家一样，我之前只是在大荧幕上看到她，所以说在我的印象当中，她就是那种非常强壮的，然后很野性的，很强烈的这种女士。
And we know from looking at her chart, we see she's got Mars in Aries, Moon in Aries, and Jupiter in Aries. There's a lot of fire here. And we can see that some of the roles that she has played as an actress express some of this fiery Aries.
我们知道她的火星、月亮以及木星都是在白羊座的，因此呢，就有很多这种火象的东西。我们也知道她在电影当中所担当的这些角色，都很多的表达了这种火象星座的特质。
But when I met her, she was so shy.
但是当我遇到她的时候呢，她特别的害羞。
I would use 2 words to describe her on the personality plane would be shy and sweet.
我会用2个词来去描述她的个性，那一个是害羞，另外一个就是甜蜜。
Which is Cancer.
那么这就是巨蟹座。
And Venus.
还有金星啊。
Very pretty.
非常漂亮。
Clint Eastwood, who was there, said, "Yeah, she's hard to look at, isn't she?"
然后那个克林特·伊斯特伍德也在场，他说，真的是看着她是很困难的一件事情，对不对？
But she looked so uncomfortable.
她看着实在是令人太不舒服了。
And she was trying to be nice.
她试着去友善。
In the Venus way, trying to smile.
她就是很想去微笑，然后表达她的这个金星。
The kids and Brad were sitting back in the middle of the theater.
然后这个皮特和孩子们都坐在那个后面剧场的这个后面。
And you could tell that she just couldn't wait until this was over.
你简直就可以看出来，她简直就等不及，等让那个首映赶紧结束。
so that everyone could stop looking at her.
这样的话就大家都可以不用看它了。
Very Cancer.
特别的巨蟹。
This was not Leo rising going,
这可不是那个炫耀的上升狮子。
You know, this is really a Cancer rising person behaving like a Cancer rising person.
这真的是一个上升巨蟹，表现的像一个上升巨蟹。
Okay? Now, notice that she's got Venus angular. It's conjunct the ascendant. Makes Venus very important.
金星和了它的四轴，金星非常重要。
Now, notice that the degree of Venus.
看一下金星的度数。
28 degrees. What else, aside from the part of fortune, what planet is also at 28 degrees?
那看一下，在这个星图当中，除了福点，还有什么行星是在28度？
Right.
对吗？
Uranus, that's right.
对。
And this is almost an exact square. It's Uranus square Venus, Uranus square the ascendant.
所以这几乎上是一个很精确的四分相，天王星是四分了它的上升和金星。
Now we saw that Uranus was important in Gandhi's chart, didn't we?
我们在甘地的星图当中看到了天王星的重要，对吗？
In this case, we see that Uranus and Venus are very important.
我们在这里看到天王星和金星非常重要。
You could say that her beauty, Venus, would be an unusual beauty.
你们可以说，那么它的美丽，这个金星是一种不同寻常的美。
And this is true. Unusual beauty.
确实是这样，不同寻常的美。
She's got a father who was an active, he's of European descent. Her mother is of Asian descent.
他的爸爸是欧洲血统，他的妈妈是亚洲血统。
And she also grew up not really knowing how she would fit in, having issues about belonging.
在他成长的环境当中，他也不知道自己属于融于哪里，这种归属感问题。
And she grew up in a divorced marriage. Her father and mother divorced early.
在他的成长环境中呢，爸妈很早就离婚了。
She rarely saw her father,
他几乎很少见到他的父亲。
who was a famous film actor,
他父亲呢是一个非常有名的电影演员，
John Boyd.
是他的父亲叫做约翰·沃里。
But he was almost always absent, so she was neglected by her father.
他的父亲几乎都是看不到的，所以朱莉是被他父亲忽视的。
Okay, so we see several things immediately. We see that she was directly impacted by divorce, grew up in that sense in an relatively unstable situation.
我们看到几件很容易立刻看到几件相关的事，一个是成长在一个离婚的家庭，第二个是成长在一个相对不稳定的家庭。
Okay? So her mother was tried to be a very protective, very strong, very good mother.
他的妈妈呢，就试图成为那种很有保护性的、很有力的、坚强的一个母亲。
Her mother would, in that sense, fight for her daughter.
在这种情况下，就是他的妈妈会为了母亲而去争取。
And there's Moon, Mars, and Aries in the ninth.
那这就是月亮和火星，那么合相在9宫的表达。
But the mother expected her daughter to be more self-reliant.
他的妈妈希望他的女儿呢能够更加的自立一些。
Moon, Mars, and Aries, mother has to be the income earner. They only get a little money from father. They get some. But, when they divorced, he was not yet as famous, but they did get money.
那么就是月亮和火星这种合相，那母亲必须要去靠自己，然后才能够赚取收入来养活家庭。他们离婚的时候，他的父亲还没有那么有名，然后给的钱只是一点点。
So her mother's example was one of, it's you and me, but we're going to make it, and I'm going to do what needs to be done to make sure that everything is okay.
所以呢，他的母亲就做出这样的一个榜样，就是我们两个能做到的，我们两个去做我希望我们去做的，然后让我们活得更好。
But there was struggle. Mother struggled.
但是在这个地方会有母亲的挣扎。
we have the moon square Saturn
我们看到了月亮和土星的四分相，
with the moon conjunct Jupiter.
月亮合向了木星。
Mother supports and encourages her daughter.
妈妈会支持和鼓励她的女儿，
Mother also pushes and fights with daughter.
妈妈也会去催女儿，妈妈也会和女儿去斗争。
See? Mother tries to be protective of daughter, but also fights with daughter, moon Mars.
月亮和火星，妈妈既是保护女儿，也会和女儿去争斗，
But also encourages moon Jupiter.
但也会去鼓励女儿，就是月亮和木星的表达。
On a good day, my mother encourages me.
时候好的时候，天气好的时候呢，妈妈就鼓励我。
Other days, she gets concerned about me and she gets a little upset with me.
天气不好的时候，她又担心我，然后就恼怒我。
My mother struggles and saddens, repeating the things she used to feel.
妈妈她有很多挣扎，就是月亮和土星不再去反复说这些让你能够看到。
I want you to study this chart and become very familiar with it.
我想让你们去学习这张基础，让非常非常的熟悉。
Okay. Let's look for some other aspects in here.
让我们再去看一下这里面的其他的相位。
In addition to the Sun-Neptune opposition and the Venus ascendant square Uranus, we have Pluto opposite Mars.
我们除了有月亮和海王星的对分相，以及金星和天王星的四分相之外呢，我们还有这个冥王星和火星的对分相。
So both of the male symbols in this chart one suggests neglect, which is Neptune, the other is the experience of some abandonment.
所以呢，我们在这里看到了，就是在男性形象方面呢，会有这种忽视，也就是海王星；此外的话，还有抛弃，就是冥王星的表达。
Right, which means that she will play out these twin themes of Sun, Neptune, and Mars, Pluto in her relationships with men.
也就是说，在她与男性的关系当中呢，她会表达出这种太阳和海王星以及冥王星与火星的对分相。
Okay. What about the lunar nodes and what they suggest about the patterns in this chart?
那么月亮焦点呢？那么它展示出来的这张星图的模式呢？
I want you to pay attention to what I'm about to say because I want you to think this way.
大家要去留意我要说的话，因为我想让你们以这种方式思考。
We see there's a lot of Gemini, don't we? There's the Sun and Mercury, South Node in Gemini.
我们看到了许多的双子座，太阳、水星还有南焦点都在双子。
Yes. But notice what house it's in.
留意一下在几宫。
The 11th.
11宫。
Right. What planet is naturally associated with the 11th house?
什么行星自然的和11宫相关呢？
Uranus.
天王星。
And so we have a South Node in the 11th.
所以我们看到南焦在11宫。
And a Venus-Uranus square.
然后呢，金星和天王星四分相。
Where do I belong?
我属于哪里
Where do I fit in amongst my peers?
在我的这些同辈当中，我属于哪里？我归属于哪里？
Who are my friends?
谁是我的朋友？
I'm not sure where I fit in.
我不确定我能融入哪里。
I look different.
我看起来与众不同。
When she was very young, she thought she was, unattractive. She thought she was ugly.
她年轻的时候，她觉得自己一点吸引力都没有，觉得自己很丑。
And yet, early on, her mother encouraged her. Her mother said, "No, you're an unusual beauty."
但是在她年纪小的时候，她妈妈又鼓励她说：“不，只不过你美的与众不同。”
And her mother encouraged her to get work. She could work as a model.
她妈妈鼓励她去做模特。
Because she grew up in Los Angeles.
因为她是在洛杉矶长大的。
Where, it's easier to get a job as a model.
在那个地方找到模特的工作很容易。
If you're tall and thin and look good.
如果你长得好，又高又瘦的话。
And yet, in high school, she said she didn't feel she didn't fit in at all.
然而她说，在高中的时候，她一点都觉得融不进去。
She was very rebellious.
她很叛逆。
And
天王星的东西。
what friends she did have tended to be the people that were misfits.
然后她有的那些朋友呢，全都是那些不合融不进去的人。
She said, when other girls wanted to be ballerinas, I wanted to be a vampire.
他说，当其他的女孩子都想当跳芭蕾舞的人的时候呢，我却想当一个吸血鬼。
And we hear a little bit of Pluto in there.
我们听到了这句话里面那个冥王的表达。
Well, we also hear a bit of Uranus, the sort of shock value of Uranus. I want to shock you.
我们也在这句话当中听到了天王星这种令人震惊的价值观，我就想激你一下。
So we can see that this person might have some belonging issues and fitting in issues, and struggle with that a little bit.
那么我们就看到这个人呢，在这个归属感和融入的这个议题上呢，他是有一些挣扎的。
Notice, however, that the North Node is in Sagittarius in the 5th house.
我们看到北焦点是在午宫的射手座。
One of the things that a person is learning about with the North Node in the 5th house is how to trust their own talent.
一个北焦点在午宫的人，他们要去学习的一个东西呢，其中之一就是相信自己的才华。
How to trust their own specialness.
去相信他们自己的专长。
Rather than constantly comparing themselves to the group.
而不是不断的将自己与这个团体相比。
Rather than constantly listening to see whom is gossiping about me and what are they saying about me.
而不是说不停的去担心谁在说我的闲话，他们在讲我什么话。
Otherwise, Gemini and the 11th reacting to gossip all the time.
要不然的话，这一个11宫和双子座就会不停的对各种闲话做出反应。
I don't care what they're saying about me, then why are you listening?
那我才不关心他们说我什么呢？那你为什么要去听呢？
I'm not listening.
我没听。
Then how do you know what they say?
那你怎么知道他们说你什么？
This is the dilemma here.
这里的这个两难。
Don't you want your life to be about something more than just reacting to what people say or don't say?
难道你不想让你的生活成为一些别的东西吗？而不是只是据别人说你或者是说你这个，或者是不说你什么做出反应？
Don't you want to develop your talent?
你不想去发展出你的才华吗？
Don't you want your life to mean something?
你不想让你的生活有意义吗？
The search for meaning is what Sagittarius is all about.
寻求意义就是射手座的表达。
Seeking a life that is bigger, more adventurous.
寻求一种更大的这种更冒险的这种生活。
And look at Jupiter in this chart, would you?
看一下它的这个星图当中的木星。
The planet associated with the sign of the North Node is on the midheaven.
这个北焦点这个星座的这个主导的行星呢，它就落在了中天。
My career, my public life.
我的职业，我的公众生活
will allow me to travel in the world.
会允许我在这个世界旅行，
To be creative.
能够让我有创意，
To have fun.
让我享受乐趣。
Whether it's someone working for a travel agency. I'm just throwing that as an example.
那或许是一个在旅行社工作的人呢，这是一个例子。
Or someone who is an actress.
或者是一个表演的人。
Okay. Either way, they're having fun.
那无论是哪种方式，他们都能获取乐趣。
Because their chosen career will be a career that allows them to have fun, encourages them to be creative, to travel and have an adventure in life.
因为他们选择的这种职业呢，都是帮助他们找到乐趣，帮助他们能够去探险，然后有创造力的这样的工作。
Think about it. There's only one Angelina Jolie.
想想看，只有一个安吉丽娜·朱莉。
There may be a lot of other charts that look like this for people born that day.
也许在那一天出生的人，有很多人的星图长得像这个样子。
There might be a woman born this day with a very similar chart, and she works she has her own travel agency.
也许同一天出生的一名女士，她有类似的星图，她有自己的旅行社呢。
You see what I mean?
你们知道我的意思了吗？
Okay. Now, I want to show you something about transits here. You're going to have plenty of time to get familiar with this chart. We're going to be talking about Angelina's chart until you've memorized it, I hope. You better memorize it.
我们现在去看一下情境，那么我们之后会多次的谈到安吉丽娜的星图，也希望大家都可以把它背下来。
All right. Why is these these pages are never like I want them to be. We're going to have to figure out a way to fix this. Let's bring this up here. We have to make this smaller. Okay, I think we can do it like this. As most of you probably remember, Angelina Jolie had to make, or chose to make, some very significant dramatic decisions in 2013.
大多数同学可能都知道，在2013年，安吉丽娜·朱莉她不得不，或者是她选择做出了一个她人生当中十分重大的决定。
Okay, she knew because her mother had died from cancer, from a specific type of cancer that also linked to breast cancer and so forth. Her mother had died early in life from a very specific kind of cancer.
她的母亲呢，在比较早年时候就过世了，是因为她得了一种与这种乳腺癌相关的这种癌症而去世的。
Now we look at this chart and let's think about this a little bit.
让我们看一下这张图，去想一想。
Okay, the moon is opposite Pluto.
月亮对分了冥王星。
Okay, it's a little wide, 7 degrees, but it's within range.
这个相位有点宽是7度，容许度有点宽是7度，但是还是在容许度范围之内。
Like 6 degrees, 35 minutes, or something like that, 36 minutes. Yeah.
大概是6度35分的样子。
But it's in opposition, and Mars, the dispositor of the moon, which is conjunct the moon, is also opposite Pluto.
然后呢，这个火星又是月亮的近卫星，它又和月亮合相。
Okay, so this suggests that something in the DNA from mom could have some kind of impact upon parts of the body associated with the moon. Now the moon rules stomach, it also rules the breast.
这就展示了，那么就是与母亲相关的有一些基因方面的东西可能会传到她身上。那因为月亮它既是和胃相关，又是和这个乳房相关的。
Now Angelina Jolie has cancer rising, sign cancer, not the disease cancer, cancer rising, and Venus in Cancer.
朱莉呢，她上升是巨蟹，金星也是巨蟹。
In the West, she was known for having very luscious lips. Her lips were very big and full, not from collagen; they were naturally that way.
那么在西方呢，就是朱莉的嘴唇很有名的，特别性感，她那个嘴唇就天生是那样，并不是外科手术做的那样。
But she was certainly an actress noted for her breasts. This is Cancer rising, Venus in Cancer.
但是呢，她就是一个以她的胸脯著名的这样一个女明星，她的这种金星在巨蟹上升巨蟹。
Okay, part of her appearance very important to her.
就是她的外貌的一部分对她非常重要。
But her mother dies earlier, and she loved her mother. She was close to her mother.
但是她的妈妈去世很早，但是她很爱她的妈妈，她跟她的妈妈非常亲密。
I think that despite the moon Mars conjunction in Aries, I think this Venus in Cancer on the ascendant of Venus' secondary mother shows the love of mother, closeness to mother.
虽然我们在这里看到了月亮和火星的合相，但是我们在这个地方还看到了金星在巨蟹，因为金星也是母亲的第二个指针，可以展示她与母亲的亲近。
And we know that this Venus in Cancer and Cancer rising has expressed itself in very unique but obvious ways in Angelina's life.
我们知道月亮在巨蟹及巨蟹上升呢，以一种非常明显的一个很独特的方式，在朱莉的生活中实现了出来。
She has adopted children from other countries.
她从不同的国家收养自己的孩子。
And then she's had children with Brad, had her own children.
然后呢，她和
biological.
然后又生了自己的孩子。
So she has a bunch of kids. I forgot how many. I want to say 6.
所以她有一堆孩子，我忘了多少个，6个还是几个
？Okay, you know, right. Is it 5 or 6? 5 children. 3 adopted, 2 biological. Right.
是大概是3个收养的，2个亲生的。This just a question. Why the lip is connected with cancer?
What is?
Why you said she has sexy lips? Lips is connected.
I wasn't making the connection of the lips with cancer. I was just saying, aside from her sexy lips, she was known for breast. I use it comparison. It's the breast that are cancer, not the lips.
那么那个老师说那个嘴唇和器械是没有关系的，他只是说他那个胸部，他那个很美的胸部是跟器械有关系的。
Even though in general a kind of luscious appearance, water signs, but generally are more sensual. Be that Scorpio, Pisces, or Cancer, water signs, almost have a more of a liquid quality to their eyes, their face.
此外的话，这个上升是水象化，不仅是巨蟹，那海王不双鱼或者是这个天蝎呢，他们都是有这种水性的这种特质，无论是眼神、面孔还是其他的这种外貌的这种水性的特质会多一些。
Okay. Right. So here we have someone who loves being a mother. She loves nurturing these children, both children from other countries, the moon's in the ninth house, and her own children.
所以我们在这个地方呢是看到一个特别喜欢当妈妈的这样的一个人，他不仅仅是有从国外过来的孩子，月亮在北中，还有自己的孩子。
Her adopted children all came out of desperate situations, refugees from war and or other catastrophes.
他收养这些孩子呢，都是来源于这种极端恶劣的生活状况，有的是这个战争当中的这个难民，还有的是一些其他的灾难所这个留下来的孩子。
Okay. And so Angelina has made this commitment to these children, to be their parent, to be their mother.
安吉丽娜·朱莉她做出了这种承诺，她要承诺做这些孩子的母亲。
Okay. And therefore, she wants to live a long time.
所以她想活得长一些。
She doesn't want to abandon these children.
她不想抛弃这些孩子。
And die earlier like her mother did.
她不想像她妈妈一样很早过世。
And she knows that she carries the same genes as her mother. She's gone to the doctor. She has the same genes. She has a high risk for developing the same cancer and dying early.
但是她知道，就是她跟她的母亲是有同样的基因的，看过医生，她也知道，就是这种风险跟她母亲罹患同类型癌症的风险很高，然后有可能提早过世。
And so she has to make. She feels compelled to make a decision about this.
她就感觉到她不得不去在这个方面做出一个决定。
She wants to survive.
她想活下来。
For herself and her children.
为了她自己，为了她的孩子们。
Right? She's born with the moon opposite Pluto.
她的出生星图上月亮对分的冥王星。
So she has to make a decision.
所以她必须要做出决定。
When in her life does she feel compelled to make that decision?
她是在她生命当中的什么时候感觉被迫要做出这样的决定呢？
When Pluto comes within orb of squaring her moon.
当这个冥王星进入到就是和她的这个月亮对分的这个相位的连续这个时候，
She makes a decision about her survival.
她就做出了一个有关她的生存的决定。
She makes a decision about her children.
她对她的孩子们做出一个决定。
Okay? And this is about long-term consequences.
这是关于长期的后果。
This is the waning square.
这是一个这个渐亏的对分项。
We talked about it a while ago.
我们刚才谈论过。
Okay? Capricorn, waning square, who a moon in Aries.
那么就是这个月亮在白羊座，然后这一个冥王星在摩羯座的这个渐亏的四分项。
She decides she will have a radical mastectomy.
她就决定了，她要去做这种极端的双乳切手术。
She will have both breasts removed.
把两个乳房都要切除。
Which will eliminate strongly chances of her ever developing having problems with the cancer in her mother.
这样的话就会非常强烈的去消除掉与他的母亲罹患同样癌症的这种可能性。
I want you to see just how literal this is, people.
同学们，我想让你们看一看，这个是多么就是活生生的一个展现。
Surgery means cutting.
那么这个外科手术是切除。
Pluto is squaring her Mars.
然后呢，这个冥王星呢是对分了它的火星。
From the 6th house.
是从从六宫这几，从六宫。
A health house.
六宫它是一个健康的宫位。
She's doing something extreme. This is Pluto.
它做了一些极端的东西。那么这是冥王星，冥王星是关于极端的。
What will we do to survive? What will we do to prolong our lives?
我们做什么才能够活下来，才能够去延续我们的生命呢？
And Pluto always says, let go of what you don't need if it means you will survive.
冥王星总会说，那就放下那些你不需要的东西，然后让你活下来。
I'm going to show you how these transits work.
我向大家展示一下这个行进是怎么走。
In terms of these orbs that I've taught you very perfectly.
我跟你们所说的这些容器都非常的精确。
Okay, you all see this. Pluto's at 10 degrees Capricorn 26 minutes. The natal moon is 13 Aries 05. Pluto has gone within the 3-degree orb, and she is having the first procedure, which is a preliminary procedure. 10 degrees, you can see it. 10 degrees Capricorn 26 minutes.
那么这个冥王星开启临近的冥王星就在10度26分的摩羯座，然后呢和这个进入到了这个月亮13度白羊座05分，形成了这个四分相的这个进入到这个龙子图范围之内。
Okay. Now, the first procedure here on February 2nd.
然后呢，在这个2013年2月2号，他就做了一个预备手术。
Is preliminary. It is aimed at preserving her nipples, which are usually removed when a mastectomy is done to treat breast cancer, but they don't. You can see that here that she's trying to preserve.
那么在这个预备手术当中呢，是他接受了一次这个保留乳头的手术。通常在交互切除的手术当中，是连乳头也要去切除到。
She was also examined for cancer and found that there was no cancer at the point.
然后在这个阶段呢，他也去检查了这个癌症，但是没有发现他有癌症。
So again, this is the beginning of 3 procedures.
所以这个是他手术的3个过程当中的第一个过程。
And the first procedure involves preserving something, even though there's going to be a lot that's let go of.
那么第一个手术呢，就是去保留那个乳头的手术，即便最后这个也是要去切除的。
If they had found cancer, she would not have been able to preserve that part of her body.
那如果在这个阶段发现他有这个癌症的话，那么这个乳头是无法被保留下来的。
I want you to see something else here just before we go on.
那在我们继续往下走之前呢，大家需要去看一看这个地方。
You'll look at this chart again next week, but I want you to notice that Mars on the beginning, the first procedure, is at 0 degrees of Pisces and square her nose.
想让大家看一下这一个行进的这个火星是在0度的双鱼座，在这个预备手术的过程当中呢，是在4分了它的这个南焦点。
Okay, and at a time when she's got Pluto aspecting the moon, she has the surgery to begin. Mars has just gone into Pisces, squaring the nose. So she's taking some action. There also is directly tied in with something very important in her life, life path. We know the lunar nodes are about your life path here.
那么也就是说，当他的这个冥王星在摩羯座进入到了与月亮的相位的时候呢，那么它的这个火星与它的焦点也形成了相位。我们知道，那么这个是代表这个行动力，而这个时候的他的这个行动呢，是直接与他的这种生活的这种目标是相关在一起的。
You're going to notice a lot of things as you study these three charts, but I'm going to try, for the sake of time tonight, to skip ahead so that you can see the main themes here.
就是与它的这个生命的道路是相关的。那今天晚上呢，我只是去粗略的跟大家去过一下这里面的一些主要的点，那么大家在以后还会去详细的看。
Okay. All right, here we are. This is when she has, on February 16th, now has the double mastectomy.
那么这个就是在2013年的2月16号，他做的那个双乳切除术。
Pluto is already made the square to Mars exact, is starting to slowly separate from that, but it's moving faster towards the square to the moon, you can see.
那么这个时候呢，它这个冥王星和火星呢是形成了一个精确的四分相，然后它在迅速的在和月亮形成四分相。
You can also notice that Mars is now moved to where it is applying towards the square to the Sun, and is Mars square the Sun and separating from the square to Neptune. So this Sun-Neptune opposition is being squared by Mars. She's in a hospital. She's having a radical surgery, cutting.
此外的话，这个行进的火星的话，也是和这个太阳形成了一个四分相，然后出离了和海王星的这个四分相。那也就是说，他在医院，他在接受手术。那么这个cutting is about what Mars。火星它是和这个切这个动作是相关的。
Okay. You'll notice more than this after you study it, but I want you to sort of see the basics here.
大家以后还会多去研究一下，但是我想让你们知道一些这个基本面。
Okay. All right, let's keep going. Also, you can think, if you want to, Mars. Remember we talked about the aspects of the semisextile and it being often an overlooked aspect. Remember that?
大家还记得我们谈论到这个12分相，它常常是一个被忽视的项目。
A lot of books, when they talk about transits, will rarely if ever mention the semisextile.
那么很多书在去谈论到行星时，几乎都不会去提这个12分相。
But Mars at 11 degrees Pisces.
但是一个11度双鱼的这个火星。
In fact, 11 degrees 31 minutes.
11度31分的一个火星。
Is well within the range of the little semisextile to the moon.
它是在和它这个月亮的一个12分相的容许度范围之内。
So not only is Mars squaring the Sun-Neptune opposition.
所以不仅仅是这个火星呢是与这个月亮和与这个太阳和海王星的四分相形成了这个七三角。
It is making a waning semisextile to the moon.
它也和这个月亮形成一个渐辉的12分相。
Which is the sign Pisces.
就是一个它是一个就是一个这个双鱼的这样的一个星座。
And Mars happens to be in Pisces.
而这个火星呢又恰好在双鱼座。
Pisces is associated with healing.
双鱼座是和疗愈相关的。
And Mars is associated with cutting.
这个火星呢是和切除相关的。
Okay. All right. She's in obviously Neptune. There's a lot of little Neptune things going on in a way. This is Mars and Pisces. We have the waning semisextile. Her natal Neptune's being triggered. Mars and Pisces. See what I mean?
所以说，你看月亮在双鱼，又有这一个渐辉的这个12分相，然后又有海王星，所以大家看到这里是有这个海王星的东西在反复的重演。
She's having a medical procedure. Obviously, she's in the hospital center.
很明显，她在接受手术，她在医院。
Okay, we're going to look at now. Now, I want you to see this. It's 10 o'clock, and it's time for you to see this last one here. All right. On April 27th, she has reconstructive surgery.
那么就是在4月27号，她进行了乳房的重建。
And this is where she gets new breasts.
她这个时候获得了新的乳房。
Get ready to scream. Get ready to scream.
准备好大喊。
All right. Uranus, which we haven't talked about yet,
行进的天王星我们还没谈呢。
is at 10 degrees Aries, 08 minutes.
在10度白羊座08分。
Just 3 minutes within the range of applying to the moon.
就是差3分，然后就是和这个月亮形成一个和月亮形成一个入相位。
This is so important. I want to make sure this is said correctly. Uranus is applying to a conjunction to the moon for the first time.
那么第一次呢，这个天王星和月亮形成一个就是入相位的一个合相。
Pluto has been square the moon all this time. Now Uranus has moved within range, is conjunct the moon.
那么这个冥王星一直和月亮是对分相，现在呢，这个行进的天王星呢，要和月亮形成合相了。
And she has new breasts.
它就有了新的乳房。
How Uranus moon can you get?
那这种情况就多么还能比这种情况怎么样还能更好的去表达月亮和天王星的这个指征呢？
Now, these are the medical facts.
那这些是它的这种医疗事实。
In a case where I want you to clearly see why we say 3 degrees applying and 1 degree separating.
就是我很清楚的跟大家说了这种入相位的3度和出相位的1度。
Okay? Now, it's not, there may be, some artistic judgment sometimes when it comes to forecasting. Again, interpretation and forecasting is an art.
我还是要说，这种预测也好，趋势也好，它们是一种艺术。
But Angelina is not a client of mine. I did not select these dates for her.
那么，朱莉呢，她不是我的客户，我并没有为她去选出这些日期。
I don't even know she has an astrologer. I have no idea.
我甚至都不知道她有没有自己的占星师。
She might not. I don't know.
她也许有，也许没有。
But all I know is that these transits clearly show the same thing I've seen with my clients for 40 years.
但是我想，我在这里看到的很清楚一点，就是我40年来在我的客户身上所看到的。
And I didn't know this until after this happened in 2013, and I got this information and looked at it and said, oh, here's a clear case.
只是他的这个手术做完之后，我才拿到他的出生信息，然后看了一下，然后才说，哇，这是一个非常清楚的案例。
Very interesting, isn't it?
非常有意思。
Okay. Now, there are other things that I want you to study between now and our next webinar.
那在下一节课之前呢，我希望大家去看一下接
Because
下来的这些东西。
I'm sure you're going to have some questions.
我确定大家肯定有一些问题。
Okay. Which is this tri-wheel on the last page.
那最后这个页的这个3个星图的这个3天的星图。
Okay. What I did was I took the first procedure, of course the natal chart's in the center.
那本命图是在中间。
And then I put the first procedure in this middle wheel.
然后它的第一阶段手术是在中间这边。
And the last procedure in the outer wheel.
那最后这个第二阶段手术是在就最后的这个阶段手术在外圈。
And I did this just so you could see how things had moved.
我这样做就是让大家看一看这个事情是怎么演化的。
Okay, it's some very interesting movement, isn't it? Mars
非常有意思，对吗？
has gone from 0 Pisces to 5 degrees of Taurus.
那火星呢，从0度的双鱼座走到了5度的金牛座。
So during this process,
也就是说，在它的这个过程当中
Mars was in Aries at some point.
在某一些点呢，这个火星是在白羊的。
And you can be sure that some of the healing was not only about physical healing, but also emotional.
大家可以很明白的看到，这些疗愈不仅仅是身体的，也有一些情绪方面的。
So before she had this reconstructive surgery, Mars had gone through Aries and had triggered her moon during the time that Pluto squared it. I'm sure that was a time of healing for her. It was physically painful and probably emotionally painful.
所以 在这个期间呢，它这个行进的火星一定是过了这个白羊座的，而这个火星过了这个白羊座的时候呢，一定触发了它这个月亮和本命的月亮和冥王星的这个相位，那么肯定是对它的一些触发了它一些很痛苦的东西。
But another thing had happened.
但还有另外的一个东西呢是，
Look at how Jupiter had moved from the first procedure to the last procedure.
我
Look
们
at
看一
that.
下，在从这个阶段到另一个阶段，它木星是怎么样走的？
Jupiter's gone from 6 Gemini to 16,
它从6度的双子走到16度双子，
made a conjunction to the Sun.
与太阳形成了合相。
A Jupiter junction to the Sun is very helpful for vitality.
这个太阳和木星合相对于活力是非常的有帮助的。
If you're going to have a radical procedure of some kind, it's good to have a body that is strong.
如果你想要做这种极端手术的话，你有一个很强大的身体是很重要的。
Or if you're going to go through something that is also potentially emotionally devastating,
如果你要去经历一些情绪上会对你极具打击的事情的话，
it takes a certain confidence and courage to make it through that.
也会要求你有一些自信和一些勇气去度过这一关。
And the Sun has a lot to do with confidence, courage. She got a little bit of support, you might say, from this Sun Jupiter that would have helped her to have a little courage and a little strength, a little vitality, probably helped with the healing process.
那太阳是和勇气和自信相关的，那么太阳和木星的这种合相呢，就能够帮助他有这一种勇气啊、自信啊、活力啊，来去帮助他度过难关。
Okay? So, I'm sure you're going to notice more than even we have alluded to tonight. Tonight, I've just shown you the dramatic pieces of these events.
今天晚上我只是向大家展示了它的这个事件的戏剧化的层面。
Now remember, these are not things that have happened to Angelina. She was not kidnapped and forced to have her breast removed.
大家要明白，其实做这个手术并不是安吉丽娜·朱莉她被迫的，或者是她被绑架了，不得不去把自己的双乳切除。
She made a choice.
她自己做出了一个选择，这样做的。
She made a decision.
她做出了一个决定。
But look at the cosmic weather within which this decision making occurred. Very interesting.
但是很有意思的是，让我们看一看在她做决定的这个期间的宇宙天气。
She made a decision about surviving.
她对于生存做出了一个决定。
Long term.
长期的生存。
Which I would say is a healthy response of the moon in Aries to a waning square from Pluto in Capricorn.
我会说，那么这是一个月亮在白羊座对冥王星在摩羯座的这个渐亏的4分相的一个很有力的表达。
Right. And of course she ended up being after this, she ended up being very public about it.
当然，在这个手术之后，他把这一切都公之于众了。
And also made the point that she believed that she should be public about it, that it was the right thing to do.
他相信他应该把这些事情公之于众，他觉得这样做是正确的。
That she did this not only because she felt it was right for her personally and for her children, but she believed she should set a good example.
他相信不仅他为他自己和他的孩子做出了一个正确的选择，他也认为这样可以设立一个榜样。
Showing other women faced with similar choices that they could do this if they wanted to, and it would be okay.
他向那些面临同样问题的女性设立一个榜样，就是如果他们这样去做的话是没有问题的。
This is a North Node in Sagittarius expression. It's something I believe in. There's a principle involved.
这个就是一个北交在射手的一个表达，就是要去展示出我所相信的，里面有一种我所坚信的原则。
Which also expresses the moon and Mars in the 9th house.
这也表现出了月亮在9宫的白羊座。
Okay? All right. So, any questions over here before we start tonight? We've gone 11 minutes over and it's time to say goodnight.
我们稍时的11分钟，就是在我们结束之前有什么问题看一下。
Maggie was saying something here.
My voice is better when I'm
Oh, they're still talking about your voice. Oh, well, let's see. We have a question from the studio audience. Oh, we have 2 questions from the studio audience.
我们的场内同学有问题。
All right, come up. We're running out of time. Come up.
我们的时间不够了，上台跟我讲。
We're going to have to cut to commercials any second.
马上就要进广告。
我就想问一下，这个电影好像说一个很重要嘛，然后怎么去判别不同究竟是电影的这方面还是电影的，比如和这个摩羯座和这个白羊和这个和月亮这个天秤这它俩是怎么定义的？
怎么样分辨见灵和见对相位？ How to differentiate a resting waning?
Oh, well, if you think of the natal chart in this case
那如果你想到这个里面的本命星图的话，
as a fixed chart, you know,
是一个固定的星图。
then that means Pluto is moved, you know, Pluto, the next cardinal sign that Pluto will hit
那么这个冥王星它会去出局的下一个基本星座
would be Aries,
就是白羊座，
right?
是吗？
So to her moon, if this is waning, in other words, she won't live long enough for Pluto to be in Aries. We know that.
那对他来说，这个就是一个月亮它这个就是一个见对相位。
Because that's gonna be like, you know, 100 years from now,
因为我们知道
90 years from
他
now,
不会等到这个冥王星走到白羊座，因
whatever.
为
It's gonna be a long time.
因为冥王星走到白羊座至少需要90年时间，他不可能活得那么长。
It's gonna be 70 something years from now. It's a long time off.
对，总之可能是从现在到那个等到这个冥王星到白羊的话，可能要70年之久。
It's waning because it's moving back towards the conjunction, which is the beginning. Conjunction is the start. We're just talking about in relationships. It's waning in relationship to her natal moon.
那么就是因为这个时候就是一个见对的相位，那么就是对回到那个合相的位置，对于他的这个本命的月亮来说。
Okay, can you see that?
他能看到吗？月亮的白羊座 ，the moon in Aries，
Yeah.
月亮在白羊座，对。
Pluto's moving. In this case, the natal chart is static, so the natal chart
因为
is fixed.
本命星图不要动，然后这个冥王星在动，
Remember,
冥王星在走向白羊座。
right. So remember that transits are, you know, when you're looking at transits, you're doing a comparative analysis. You're comparing the movement of the planets to a fixed object, in this case, the natal chart.
当你在做这个的时候，你要去把它看成这种对比分析，也就是说，这个行星呢，它的这个行星呢，它是在朝着这个本命星图当中的这个固定的形象去走。
Okay. Now we have another question.
我的问题就是我不知道，就是老师知不知道家庭系统排列？因为海灵格曾经说过，就是因为刚才不说到，就是朱莉有很多孩子嘛，被收养的。然后那个海灵格说过，就是收养孩子是不对的。但是我想知道，就是占星学有没有这么说过？就是收养孩子是给一个家庭会带来灾难的这样的。
Okay.
就是有没有
这个同学的问题是说，在他说这个海灵格家庭系统排列系统当中呢，说收养孩子会给带来灾难。问老师是这样从占星学的角度。 因为是在still understanding from the Chinese constellation method, Hellinger used to say that adopting a child is in disaster to a family.
Really?
真的吗？真的。What's your point of view from DNA astrology?
Number one, I would say it's almost impossible to live a life without having some disaster.
首先，我想说的是，你这一辈子过得没有什么灾难，基本上是不可能的。
And I think it's Hellinger. I mean, Hellinger, you know, apparently did a lot of wonderful things.
海灵格当然做了很多很棒的工作，
Has been a very positive influence on many people.
他对很多人都造成了很多非常积极的影响。
But if Hellinger said this,
但假设如果是海灵格是说这样的话的话，
I think that's a terrible thing to say.
我觉得说这话实在是太不好了，
Just
太糟糕了，
terrible.
太糟糕了。
You know, again, because I know lots of adopted children, lots of families with adopted children.
因为我认识很 多这种收养的孩子以及收养孩子的家庭。
And I don't know that they have any more trouble than anybody else.
我觉得他们的麻烦也就是正常人比起来，那些正常家庭的麻烦也不见得比他们少。
I'm glad what you're saying is not true because I once got on a plane coming out of China, coming out of Beijing.
那我非常高兴你说这个不是真的，因为有一次呢，我坐在飞机上面回北京。
Where there were at least 15 adopted babies on that plane.
至少飞机上面有15个被收养的孩子。
They spun hell into that plane to the crash.
如果基于海灵格这个观点的话，那飞机是要坠毁了。
I remember looking around and thinking there must be an orphanage in China that's empty.
然后我还记得我在另一个飞机上想，中国的哪个孤儿院是不是都空了？
There were so many adopted babies on that plane.
那个飞机上面有这么多被收养的孩子。
And they kept me awake for 18 hours.
然后这个还让我18个小时都无法睡觉。
Okay. All right. So the point is, I think it's horrible that someone would say that.
我的观点就是，如果有人说这样的话，我觉得实在太糟糕了。
Okay, that's all.
就这样。
That's just my opinion. As a person, it has anything to do with the problem.
这是我作为一个人的观点，这跟占星毫无关系。
Okay. All right. Okay. I think family constellation work. Great work.
我觉得家海的工作很棒，特别棒。
You know? Okay. Terrific. Yeah.
特别棒。
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
好，祝大家晚安。
We'll be taking another look at